In this video, we're going to show you how to install a TFI relocation module kit from Fatfoxx. So the kit we're going to be working on is a 423706. Now this is a basic kit for an 86 to 93 Ford Mustang. What comes in the kit is going to be your instructions, your bypass 3-wire harness, an assortment here that I'll take out and show you. I just have a TFI module tool, replacement tool there, and another TFI module just for demonstration. Now it also comes in the kit is going to be your aluminum heat sink and then a nice sticker from Fatfoxx. Inside your bag you're going to find that there are 3 separate wires. There's an assortment of heat shrink, dielectric grease, heat sink grease, a zip tie, and the various connectors and screws you're going to need to put the kit together. So for the purpose of this installation, we are going to follow the exact instructions that come with the kit from Fatfoxx. So with this, we will follow line by line going through here. I've already read the instructions. They're very straightforward. It's just going to take a little bit of time to get everything situated, and it's going to work perfectly at the end. Now the honest truth about the TFI relocation module, a lot of times you don't realize you need one until it's too late and you've already burned out a TFI module. The whole goal of this is to get the module itself, which is prone to heat soak and overheating, which tends to destroy it, and sometimes other things, is to get it out of the engine bay. So you know in the factory location, it sits right here in the front of the distributor, plugs into a harness that runs up under your intake. Now the reason this overheats a lot of times is that when you close down your hood, you think you close this down, that stops heat from going up the top. You also have exhaust over on the side putting heat into the engine bay. And of course, your radiator and your fans pushes hot air directly into the front of the engine, which rises because it's heat, and it goes right to your module. So typically when the module hits about 250 degrees in that range, it tends to overheat and it basically stops working. So then at that point, your engine won't run. It will crank all day long, it will flood with fuel, but will not spark because that module does not tell your ECU that it's time to ignite the fuel. Now the car we're working on has had the battery relocated already to the trunk. So what you can see is that I've already taken off step 1, which is to remove the negative cable from the battery. So step 2 is going to be taking loose this harness. Now this is your PIP harness that comes in here. It runs under your intake all the way back to roughly behind where the throttle body is. You want to take this connector loose and bring this harness out till you get to roughly about here behind your throttle body. Now it's kind of up to you how you want to do it. If you have a stock harness itself, it'll come out pretty easy outside the plastic shroud or the plastic covering that's in there. For me, I got a little bit different case here. I've got to take loose my intake and take my intake off with all the other connections so that I can expose that. I've already done kind of a wire tuck, so I can show you here there's no wires anywhere other than the firewall and a couple places. So I've got to take my intake off in order to get that exposed all the way back to roughly the throttle body. All right, so if you're going to plan to take your intake off, just remember there are 6 total bolt holdings on. You can get to each one with a 6-inch extension, a deep well 1/2 inch, and a ratchet. Remember the top 2 up here under your intake plaque, if you have one, which is just going to be a small Allen screw. You can just take those off there, pull the plate off, and then you have 2 screws there to take out. And then again, there's 2 in the back that look just like your 2 in the front, which are right here. So 6 total, take those off, then pop off your intake once everything else is out of the way. So once you have your intake off, if you choose to take it off, you can unplug your TFI module and pull your harness loose. So the end connection here is the plug itself, and then you have your piece there for doing your timing. But what you want to do is take this loose. Now if you don't take your intake off, this will come loose anyway out of the plastic connector all the way around. So you've got your injectors and your harness coming loose, and you want to take it out basically to roughly about there. Roughly about the heater hoses, somewhere in that range, in order to get everything loose. So as we jump into step 3, what you're going to find is you have an additional 3 wires that come from your connection at the module. And these are the ones that are going to be extended with the wiring that comes in the kit. So you can kind of get these separated away from each other because these will be cut and extended. These will just be routed. One thing to note in these colors, you can see that the ones you're worried about are going to be a red with a light blue, a red with light green stripe, if I can find it, and then an orange with a yellow. Now the kit comes with corresponding extensions. So you've got a red with a blue, red with a green, orange with a yellow, and then you also have in here color-coded, you would say, heat shrink. So you've got a blue that can go with your blue up there, a green for your green, and then an orange for your orange. All right, you're going to want to pull these 3 wires that you're going to extend as close or as far over to the passenger side as possible. You want to keep in mind that you want to be right around this bend for the brake line, and that way everything is going to be able to reach. So you can kind of pull these over. When you cut these, do them one at a time, but stagger them out. So if I cut, let's say this one here, I don't want to cut the next one right here. I want to go down a little bit and then the next one down a little bit. And what that's going to do is help make it easy to do each of them separately, but you don't have to worry about the joint itself. So just stagger them out. You might do it maybe 3/4 to an inch away from each other. So here, here, and then here, and that way it makes it easy. When it comes time to cut everything, use some good sharp side cutters. So you would cut your OEM snip, and then you'll have your extension. You'll want to then use some strippers to take about 3/4 of the sheath off. So 3/4 of an inch, take those off on each end, and then when you put them together, you'll obviously start wrapping them together this way, and you're going to solder each of these connections. So it should look, when you're done, it should look something a little better than this, but it should look like one piece of solid wire as best as possible. So you'll then solder these connections here, and then you can put some sheathing over. So again, red with a blue stripe gets a piece of blue, and that will go straight over that. And then once the connection is done, you can just use your heat gun and heat that up, and it will be a beautiful, good connection for good signal. All right, so once you have all your 6 connections made, which is basically, remember, 3 wires, you're going to cut and splice in basically a 41-inch extension on each of those. So on each end of each wire, you will get 2. So you'll have 6 connections to make their extending those in. Next piece is going to be step 4. Now this is where we're going to get our extension harness from our PIP module, or basically the sensor inside the distributor, and we're going to get out our extension harness. So it comes bundled together. Cut off the zip tie there, you don't need it anymore. Set your cutters down, and then you're going to have 2 ends. So you have one end that has no drain wire on it, so it's basically 3 wires, a red, a black, and a blue. And then you're going to have the other one that is the same 3 wires, red, black, and blue, but you're also going to have your drain wire there. So for the end that goes to the distributor itself, you're going to have this with the drain wire. Now at these here, you want to bend them 90 degrees. So if you think of the module, the connector, when it goes in, there goes in, and then the module goes up. So each of these need to be bent about 90 degrees. So you're just going to take your fingers and bend them over. And you almost have to bend them a little bit more, but what's the goal is to get roughly 90 degrees that way. So when you plug in your module connections there into your distributor, what you'll have is you'll have 3 of those there. Now this piece here, you're going to slide some green heat shrink over. With these, you're going to strip back basically about 1/4 inch there, something very simple. Put on a spade connector on there, crimp it on, and before you do that, you slide on the corresponding heat shrink onto these. So you have each of those there, slide it on, do the spade connector, and then you're going to, at that point, take out your distributor. All right, so this is what you should get once you have all your connectors crimped on and your heat shrink slid over. I haven't heated it yet, so you can see that once you have it crimped on, your connectors here, you notice there's really no electrical copper sticking out beyond those. Now you don't want these to ground on anything, so once you slide these on, the amount of protrusion, I guess, out of your tape and everything else here that comes out in the kit is approximately the length of this heat shrink. Very well designed, so you can just basically crimp these on, slide each piece over, so you can see it comes right down to where the tape is, and then you have your ground or your drain wire here. So there's your green. Now all of these here, once this is on, I can now go in and use my heat gun and heat shrink these all down, and again, try to get those just so you have just a little bit poking out of the heat shrink there, but you don't want too much sticking out. Alright, so the next piece of this is going to be removing your distributor. Now before you do anything of taking the hold down apart or anything, one of the things I want you guys to notice is that on mine right now, the way mine is timed, the rotor itself inside the ignition or the distributor is timed at about 130. So I just made myself a little mark there just to know that my rotor needs to be facing at that point when it's back in. Second piece is right there. You notice right next to the hold down, there's a casting mark right there into the distributor, and I've made a mark there also. It's kind of grainy, but just know that I've made a mark so that I know that that casting mark has a paint mark that it needs to correspond to when it goes back together. Now to take this apart is a 1/2" wrench to take that hold down bolt out. You can then take the hold down off and then slide the distributor out. And just know that just kind of give it a little wiggle as you take it out, and your distributor or the rotor itself is going to turn a little bit because it's right now keyed to the camshaft and that. So once you put it all in, just remember when you put the distributor back in, that mark down there needs to line up, and it needs to line up with that mark so that I know that timing is roughly correct, that is ballparked there, and my rotor is to the correct cylinder. Alright, so with the distributor taken off, wipe off the gears on that. They should have a little bit of oil on them. At this point, you can take your TFI module off the distributor if you haven't to this point. That's where this little doohickey comes in. It's basically a thin wall socket. And so you can put it in, take out your TFI bolts themselves, and then you can take your TFI module off. So take bolt screws completely out, and then slide your module down out of the distributor. So there's the pieces apart. Now once you have it off, you should have some grease left over from your module, so you can go ahead and wipe that off. It's probably pretty tacky in that, so just use some paper towel, kind of scrub it clean, because there's really nothing that's going to block this grease anymore. So having grease there just looks bad. You know, there's nothing else that's going to be on it. Alright, so once you have your TFI all cleaned off, you can then take your harness itself, put a little dab of the dielectric grease into the terminal itself on the distributor. It's nicely right size, so it just kind of squeeze a little bit in there, and then you can install your connector. Now the instructions on there say to go from go black, red, and blue. So I follow the instructions there, and then you have your green here. Alright, so once you have everything wired, this is basically what you're going to look for. You've got a black, red, and blue, all following the diagram in the instructions. You have your shielding wire, which is you had come in. It was the copper that came through. Your green heat shield that went over it, and then the connector here for the hook. So this goes in here. Now I'll show you. This is going to be your thick 4mm fastener here that is going to ground it down to the module. And then as everything comes out and goes to the driver's side of the vehicle, there is a mushroom fastener here, and then there's also going to be a zip tie here. So put your zip tie around it loosely, but don't snug it down. Put in your fastener here. Make sure everything is aligned here. Now again, this is why you did the 90 degrees. It comes down and goes there. You can adjust this length as you need to. And I have mine running behind here, so it kind of gives it a little bit of support. So these wires are actually supported by this wire going behind, not grounded by it, but it's just kind of helping it so that these don't have a lot of force here. And this helps support your everything here and your wiring harness. So now all your length out there, that needs to go back in. So at this point, it's time to put the distributor back in. So just kind of coil up all your extended harness here, put the distributor back in, and then we start worrying about wiring up the TFI module next. Alright, now with the distributor back in place, remember your alignment marks here is good. And if I show you my rotor, it aligns up here, which is good. So at that point, the harness itself has gone back through. Now I just need to combine all this back up before I put the intake on later. And then I can put my cap back on, and I've put down my hold down bolt. Now it's time I can just basically align all that where it's going, but I can start to work on the TFI module going to the back of the heatsink. Alright, the next piece is going to be mounting your TFI module to your heatsink that comes in the kit. So when it comes in and you have some heatsink grease, you're going to cut the tip off of this and you're going to spread it very well across the back of the TFI module. So now what I've done just for demonstration is showing you kind of the target zone of where everything goes. So your module plug is going to be on that side. You can lay it on there. Now the bolts that hold this on are going to be what the module was held to the distributor with. So you can take that there, your prongs will be there, and then you can see that they're going to be labeled also based on the exact way they came off the distributor and how it matches up. So again, remember this is going to be your passenger side where your module mounts to the distributor itself. So black, red, blue should match exactly on your distributor. So once you have a good amount of the heatsink grease all the way on here, make sure it's well coated. And again, I did this kind of this black line just so you know this is your target. You don't have to have it all the way over here or anywhere else. Just put it on the back of the TFI module there. That way you know you don't have a lot of squeeze out. Now this grease itself helps create a good thermal bond between the module and this heatsink. So that way it basically acts as a big heat conductor to pull, or this does, acts as a cooling fin for the module. So it keeps it nice and cold. I can tell you this aluminum itself is cooled just to the touch sitting here. So I can tell you it's going to help with this module, keeping it very well thermally cool. Alright, so at this point you can go ahead and connect up your module to your harness. Now at this point your restriction is probably going to be the length of this, depending on where it's going to go. So at that point, take the time to, before you get everything connected up with your extension harness, take the time to start figuring out where you want this to go. Now, the instructions say that you could put this basically on the chassis brace that goes from the sheet metal in the car out to the fender itself. There's also some opportunity there to put it next to the hood latch on some of the other cars. Now, in the 94, 95 Mustangs, what Ford did is they actually put something like this underneath the airbox. You can also do that if you have everything in the engine bay. The goal is to get everything away from the engine bay, outside of the engine bay, into somewhere cool. So you can do it inside your fender well, anywhere you want to be, anywhere the length the harness reaches to. Just know that you have to take out this module in order to time the car. So make it somewhere accessible, not like crazy you have to take apart 7 body panels or anything to get to. You don't have to put it in the front. Put it somewhere reasonably accessible for timing, and then you can start to get your mounting holes together, drill the holes if you need to, and then put some fasteners in there to put this in place, and then you can start buttoning up everything. Alright, so here's going to be how I mount my piece. So here's the aluminum heat shield. Now I did drill 2 holes in the chassis brace so you can kind of see it spanning from the body out to the fender. Just put in 2 10mm bolts or M8 bolts I had laying around that fit. So the heatsink is mounted permanently there. You can see it's mounted here. Now again, black, red, blue. That goes with the color scheme based on the instructions. And then my harness is in here, supported running along the top ridge of the inner fender there. So everything is good. Now one thing it notes in the instructions before you cut, even though I've already measured this, you want to come in here with an ohm meter. So if you got basically an ohm meter, you can set it on ground or continuity, and you want to check that you have a good ground between anything metal, and I'd really go for a non-coated metal surface. So I have some aluminum sway bar blocks, and you hear that beep, means it has good continuity. So it's traveling up through the sway bar mount, up through the body all the way in and into this here. So this is well grounded, and which means my module should be well grounded. That's a good sound. Now following the instructions, basically it tells you 3 different times to check your PIP wiring at the distributor and then also at the module in its new location. So it gives you an awesome picture here that you can set up here. So I can literally take this, set it right under the distributor itself and say, okay, black, red, blue. I can then go to my new module mount here, which is like this in there, and look in there and go black, red, blue. So, module is good. Now, at this point, I have already mounted it. I verified the ground, and then I cut the wires. So it says in here in the instructions, 5 basically covers routing everything there, cutting, doing all that stuff. 6 is more like the mounting. And on that one, I'm going to tell you, based on just doing it, I would say before you cut anything, figure out where you're going to mount it, trial mount it, double check that it's got a good ground. So using your ohm meter, measuring very little resistance, which is ohms, or just using the continuity between beep, beep. If it beeps at you, you know you're in pretty good shape there. At that point, double check your routing all the way to it. For all of your wires in that, make sure that they're going to be covered, supported, then cut the harness, the extension harness from the PIP going from the distributor all the way out to your module. That's the last piece. Once you have those done, fold everything back, put on the 3 female connectors, put a little dielectric grease on each of the connectors, and then you can mount them in there. Now at this point, you want to make sure that your drain wire itself is tucked up in there. So you can cut it back a little bit if it's too long, wrap it in electrical tape, and you want to make sure that it cannot, I repeat, cannot touch metal anywhere along the way from the distributor all the way in there. So make sure that is done properly. If you run it through metal, make sure it's grommeted. You know the drill. Just keep it in good shape. So based on the instructions, step 6 is mounting. At that point, you're almost done. 7 is finish. The last piece, step 7 in here, is to tidy everything up. So if you took your intake off, you can now verify all the wire routing, put any covering back on, put your intake back on, and at that point, for the 3rd time, check your PIP routing. From the distributor, remember, black, red, blue, needs to go all the way through, down into your module, double check it based on the picture, black, red, blue. At that point, if everything is ready to go, connect your negative battery cable, turn the key. Let's see if it starts. So soon after that, I just double checked everything, intake back on, checked all my lines, got everything wrapped up, and the first turn of the key fired right up. So I allow it to get a little bit of heat in the engine. I pulled the pill out of the PIP, kind of the piece there. I always call it the PIP pill or the timing pill. Pull that out so it sets base timing. Use the timing light, and I've got it set back to where I wanted it. Lock the distributor down with the nut there and the bolt on the hold down, and it's idling beautifully. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. I'm going to double check everything again, and then it's time to finish it up. So with everything put together, that kit is completely done. Now, if you have any questions, you can always check out Fatfoxx.com. Now, Fox has 2 X's, remember, Fatfoxx.com. Now, Ray has a lot of other stuff. He has TFI module kits for other things other than exactly what I did. This is kind of like his base kit, I guess you'd call it like that. There's other models out there with different heat sinks and some other things out there. So check out Fatfoxx.com. You can look at it there. It also has 3G alternator upgrade kits, which are pretty awesome too. And if you have any questions with anything, either through this installation or you just have general questions, you can check out Ray there. He's also got a phone number down on the website that you can contact him. So any questions, drop me a comment below. Otherwise, check out Ray at Fatfoxx.com. And thanks again, Ray. We'll see you next time.